welcome to Caapi Cottage Store Porch. Today we are dealing with the subject of uncivilized and touching the jaguar. I'd like to talk about your vision of the life economy. You talk about how things could turn around and how we could move towards that. And yet some of our business icons right now, first name that jumps to mind is Elon Musk, who planning a trip off planet. His solution is off planet. He started out as this great green, automobile maker, and now he wants to be a narcissist in space. And he says he's ready to, coup anybody in Bolivia to get his lithium for batteries if necessary. That's what he tweeted out. So I'm not misquoting him. How do you feel about those particular people being in charge of a life economy, and how do you counteract that kind of energy? I'll ask both of you that.
Well, first, the death economy that we've got to overcome is an economic system that is ravaging the planet, that basically is consuming itself into extinction because it's driven by a single perception that the goal should be to maximize short-term profits for corporations and short-term materialistic consumption for individuals. And that's a pretty recent idea. If we look at human history, 200,000 plus years that we've been humans, only for a very few of those, a blink of an eye historically, have we bought into that concept. The concept has always been take care of the next generations, as indigenous people do. The life economy then is an economic system that's based on a goal of maximizing long-term benefits for people and nature. And it pays people, it pays investors, and it pays workers to clean up pollution, to mine all the plastic that's floating around in the oceans, as some entrepreneurs are beginning to do, and recycle it, to regenerate destroyed environments, and to recycle and to come up with new technologies that do not ravage the earth. Solar and wind are the beginning examples, but they're just the beginning. And we have to change that perception that it's not about short-term profits. And, I speak at in addition to shamanic events, I speak at international economic conferences. I was recently speaking at one in St. Petersburg, Russia, 12,000 people there, including President Putin and Guterres, the Secretary General of the United Nations, and many heads of big banks and Wall Street and corporations from the United States and elsewhere. And I talked about the life and death economy. And afterwards, during receptions, Russians love vodka and caviar and champagne. So they have great receptions, And during these receptions, some of these executives would come up to me and they would say, I totally agree with you. These are guys that run big corporations. They'd say, I have children and grandchildren. I want a greener world. But I know that if I lose 0.5% of market share, or if my stock price goes down a little bit for a few weeks, my main investors, Wall Street, will fire me and replace me with someone who only cares about market share or stock prices. And so they said, well, so you get out there and tell people to send me emails or texts or whatever they send, and get all their social networks and circles to send these and say, something like, hey, I love your product. I'm not going to buy it anymore until you pay your workers in Indonesia a fair wage, or clean up the pollution you've caused, or whatever it is. And I think we all have to understand that these corporate executives are driven by that. And some of them may be totally narcissistic. They may be sociopaths, maybe Musk is, I don't know. But those people are not driven just by profit. They're driven by success. They want to be successful. And if we redefine success not as being short-term profits, but long-term benefits, I believe they'll come around. But we, the people, consumers, investors, and employees, we have to push this. I'm reminded of Franklin Roosevelt, who the last days after during World War II, he met with a group of union leaders from the auto industry. And as they're leaving the Oval Office, he says to them, I think you know that I'm on your side. I want to do what you want me to do, but you're going to have to go out there and get your rank and file to force me to do it. It's the only way I'm going to get it through Congress, or pass the voters. And I think that's so true of so many corporations. Not all of them, but though all the ones that are publicly traded, that's true of. So I think we need to push, and we need to redefine who we put on the cover of who's the person of the year at Time magazine, who we put on the cover of Fortune and the business magazines, and I think it's that perception of what it means to be successful. And before the coronavirus, we were seeing a huge emergence of conscious capitalism, the Green New Deal, B corporations, benefit corporations. In August of 2019, almost 200 of the world's most powerful executives came together at the Business Roundtable, and they basically said we can no longer base our objective on maximizing short-term profits. They said this: we have to take better care of our employees, our customers, and so on. They made this commitment, but they won't be able to keep it unless the investors, the consumers, the employees, us, all of us, push them, make them do that.
I mean, at this point, I'm pretty sure everyone knows that unless your meat says it is free range and hormone free, that it's pretty much made in a factory farm, and that they're going to suffer horrible cruelty and have all kinds of chemicals, and yet most of us will still buy it because the price is right. So when you have consumers who still have to deal with stretching the dollars they have, do you think that it's reasonable to think that they will be able to apply the pressure necessary to get companies to act correctly?
Well, that's up to you, Michael. It's not just going to happen. The agents of change, the revolutionaries, whatever we want to call ourselves. A lot of people object to that they don't want to be called a revolutionary, but an agent of change. We need to keep pushing. And that's always been the case. John Adams, several years after the end of the Revolutionary War, he surmised, and historians have pretty much confirmed, that in 1777, as the war was already well underway, about a third of Americans were Tories. They were loyalists. They wanted to stay with the British crown. And a third were revolutionaries. And the other third didn't care. They didn't know. They didn't know what to think. But in the end, the revolutionaries turned. Many of the Tories, some left. They went to Canada. They went back to England. Some were killed in the battles, but a lot of them turned around because they began to see that they actually could win, and that was part of it. And they began to see how unjust the British Army was, how they dealt with their prisoners and so forth. And yet the Americans were much more compassionate. I'm not trying to paint the Patriot soldiers as angels, but they were, compared to the British, in many respects, they were. And so things turned around, and we've seen these times over and over. One time we thought that Hitler was going to take over the world. My parents were terrified of that. And then during the Cold War, we were convinced that the Soviet Union was going to take over the world, or North Vietnam was going to take over Asia if it won the Vietnam War. I remember these times. You don't, Michael, but they were there. You've read about them. But we've gone through these times before. Terribly, terribly difficult times. Think about the American Civil War. Think about what's happened in the Caribbean, and the slave trade, and time and time again. And what it takes is for people like us, like you, at this point, and to really, really push hard for change. Change doesn't just happen. We have to make it happen. We have to get people to touch that jaguar. We have to show them the jaguar. We have to convince them there is a jaguar there that they can touch, and that it will come around. We have to bring this jaguar into it. I'm wearing a jaguar. I'm always touching this jaguar. And that's what's exciting about these times. Keep up your great work, both of you. I love what you do. I love you, and hope to see you in person.
Cool. Thank you. Thanks. Bye-bye. You can hit the end button.